Good morning, it's November 4th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, tomorrow's election day, and hopefully we can learn the results in a timely manner. I'm not hopeful, but I would like to see it. We either have Kamala Harris or Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. Now, millions of votes have already been cast, either in mail-in ballots or early in-person voting. And I would hope that the election operatives in each state have already engaged in some form of counting to speed up the process. If you're to ask me who to win tomorrow, I can only give you my own insight and why I think the winner will be Donald Trump. I could be wrong, but this is how I see it one day out. First, he's doing better in polling than ever before, and history tells us that Trump normally outperforms polls. In both 2016 and 2020, he was further behind in polling than he turned out to be in real count votes. In the key battleground states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and especially Pennsylvania, today's polling shows it neck and neck. And if history is any guide, it bodes well for Trump to win at least one of those states and possibly sweep the so-called blue wall. Second, Trump, for all his foibles and dumb things he says, he's a known quantity and has talked about the issues that matter most to the voters. He promises a better economic outlook to them and openly addresses the immigration issue that has become one of the top issues in this cycle. So much so that several Democrats running down the ballot have distanced themselves from the Biden-Harris position on this massive influx of illegal migrants. Well, turning now to Harris' campaign and why I think she'll lose on Tuesday. First, a historic Democratic voting bloc will desert her in margins that polls haven't anticipated. Hundreds of thousands of traditional Democrats who came of age in the post-war America can't visualize Miss Harris walking in the footsteps of their legendary party leaders who preceded her. I'm talking about icons like FDR, Harry Truman, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and maybe even Hubert Humphrey. She suffers from a stature gap that $1 billion of advertising can't change, and even if voters don't mark their ballot for Donald Trump, it will be to his benefit. The vice president has nearly 4 years to rise to levels of national and international prominence, to expand her vitae beyond what being Joe Biden's choice to fill his designated slot. She was put in charge of the southern border, no matter how much she tries to deny this fact. She squandered that opportunity, or perhaps Mr. Biden's inner circle didn't loosen the leash. Either way, the result's the same. She isn't the person who matches the moment. Second, Ms. Harris was unprepared to enter the rough and tumble of national politics, and at the 11th hour, she just relies on being propped up, as she has throughout her career, by patrons, Barack Obama, his operatives, and the national media that is predominantly desperate to prevent Mr. Trump from re-entering office. Ms. Harris is a victim of her own success through moving up the political ladder without being fully tested by challenges and conflict. Hence, while she promotes her career path as a tough prosecutor, when it came time to face the national jury, she abdicated to the teleprompter and friendly interviewers. The canary in the coal mine for her impending defeat is the veiled betrayal of those who engineered this putsch that shoved Miss Harris through the door while forcing Joe Biden out. They ridicule the vice president's oddball answers in televised interviews as she retreats into her word salad city. Third, and the final nail in her coffin, has been her inability to separate herself from Joe Biden. When asked what she might do differently than Biden, she said there wasn't a thing that came to her mind that she would have done differently than President Biden. In the end, the Democrats picked a flawed candidate, and I suspect they did it because they'd become so immersed in identity politics they felt they could not pass on her because she was a woman of color. It would open them up to being hypocrites, which they are, and if they left her at the curb and chose someone else. What they should have done was had a short but vigorous primary where the winner would have been forced to get the votes necessary to win the nomination. The Harris campaign failed their candidate miserably, or maybe they knew what would happen by keeping her isolated from the media. She's not held a single press conference since nominated. She gave the same campaign speech over and over as she reads it from the teleprompter. And I have to assume they understood what she would go to that word salad response when she talks but says nothing. In the end, Harris did not have a strong message that would bring voters to her side. She relied on a campaign based on fear of Donald Trump. But the American public already knew who Trump was, and her comparing him to Hitler and calling him a fascist was not bringing voters to her camp. And if you watch the Harris campaign, you realize that even before the convention, she made a huge mistake. She chose Tim Walz over Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro was apparently too Jewish. The selection of Walz is the first reason she lost momentum. To be sure, much of the party, and many of the liberal media, wanted Harris to pick Josh Shapiro. But first, because the Keystone State was certain to be most pivotal in the election, and second, because Shapiro would have added ideological balance to the ticket. The choice of Walz yoked Harris to all his baggage, his exaggeration of his military record, his DUI arrest, which involved him driving 96 miles per hour with a 1.128 blood alcohol content, his multiple visits to China and association with communist officials, his fabrication that he was in Hong Kong on the day of the Tiananmen Square massacre when he was actually in Nebraska, his being turned into an Elmer Fudd meme because of his comical handling of a shotgun, and his being the governor who allowed violent anarchists to run wild and burn down parts of Minneapolis. And I didn't mention, he insisted on putting tampons in boys' bathrooms. Now, I'll bet they got a laugh out of that. Harris has continued to make mistakes because the Democratic Party dictates that identity politics always supersede qualifications. It's how Kamala Harris became the vice president and ultimately the candidate for president, and in the end, ultimately a failed candidate. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. Hit the subscribe button.